Throughout its history, Roman civilization had many enemies, but none of them were as fierce as Germanic people, and no other ethnic group fought Romans for so long. Romans and Germanic tribes fought on the first contact, and wars between these two peoples resulted in the collapse of Rome. Cimbrian War of 113–101 BC was the first conflict, and it had influenced Roman society for the next 6 centuries. Welcome to the 3rd edition of Kings and Generals. By the mid-2nd century BC, Roman Republic occupied most of the civilized world. Rome defeated Seleucid in 188 BC, Macedon in 148 BC, and Greek alliance in 146 BC, and that allowed it to take control of Greece and Dalmatia. To the west, Romans defeated a number of Gallic tribes in the 120s BC and created the province of Gallia Narbonensis in the modern southern France. Republic and its client states were in control of the Mediterranean coast. But new enemies were already on their way. Sometime around years 120–115 BC, Jutland Peninsula suffered some kind of catastrophe. Geologists and archaeologists are still debating on the nature of this event. Either peninsula was flooded or extreme cold made it virtually unlivable. Tribe populating modern-day Denmark called Cimbri had to leave these lands. We don't know much about this tribe, and even its ethnic origin is not clear, as some historians think that they were Proto-Germans and others claiming that they were Celtic descent. By year 115 BC, Cimbri left their lands and began migrating to the south. They were joined by their neighbors and possible relatives Teutons in the northern Germany. Tribes now 200,000 warriors strong moved into the modern-day Czech Republic. However, Celtic Boii tribe populating these lands was able to stop the invaders and force them to change their route. In 113 BC, Cimbri and Teutons crossed the Danube into Pannonia and then moved to Noricum, modern-day Austria. Another Celtic tribe, Taurici, called this region home. They weren't able to stop the invaders and therefore asked allied Rome to help. It's a good moment to talk about new trends in the Roman society. All the victory and conquest made the elites of the Rome even richer and allowed them to consolidate the lands. Poorer classes lost respect for the aristocracy. At the same time, as poor were now landless, they were not able to become legionaries, for simple reason that landless were not allowed to join the legion. These factors were weakening the Roman army in terms of leadership, morale, and numbers, and that became one of the central themes of this war. Roman consul Gnaeus Papirius Carbo answered the call of allied tribe and moved his legions to block northern eastern Alpine passes into Italy. Cimbri sent emissaries promising that they are not going to attack Taurici anymore. Carbo seemingly agreed to peace and gave the tribes guides to show their route away from the Roman territory, but at the same time he laid an ambush for them. When tribes learned of that, they attacked Roman ambush near Noreia and crushed the legion. Romans lost more than 20,000 soldiers in the battle, and their consul, alongside with the remainder of the troops, were able to save their life only due to the storm. For reasons unknown, Cimbri and their allies didn't attack Italy after that and moved to the west through the modern-day Switzerland. Celtic tribes called Tigurini and Togeni joined them along the way. All these tribes moved into Gallia. We don't know much about tribal alliances time in modern-day France, but some historical accounts claim that they raided and looted Gallia and Gauls were not able to stop the invaders. Rome was happy not to have to deal with the invaders anymore, as they have been drawn into a Jugurthine War of 112-106 BC in Numidia, modern-day Algeria. This war underlined the problems in the Roman society we talked about. Roman military and civilian leaders were bribed by the Numidian leader Jugurtha multiple times. Roman army became so disorganized that they were basically bogged down against a much weaker enemy. In 109 BC, Cimbri and their allies stopped raiding Celtic Gallia and decided to move into Roman-controlled Gallia Narbonensis. Roman consul Marius Junius Silanus attempted to negotiate with them. Tribal alliance demanded lands in the Rhone Valley and promised to defend Roman borders, but Silanus declined this offer. In the ensuing battle, Romans have been defeated yet again. Most of the tribes returned to the Gallia Transalpina, while Tigurini stayed to run Narbonensis, and in 107 BC they ambushed newly formed Roman army near Burdigala, modern-day Bordeaux. Roman leaders were killed and there were almost 10,000 casualties. Remaining legionaries were allowed to return to Rome only after they walked under the yoke, which was considered the biggest disgrace for Romans. This defeat was like an alarm bell for the Romans, and now they understood that Germanic threat is real. Two new armies were formed in order to send to Gallia Narbonensis, and they had 80,000 legionaries. As the most talented Roman general Gaius Marius was leading African army at the moment, non-aristocrat Gnaeus Mallius Maximus was designated to lead the army, and Quintus Servilius Caepio was the second in command. Caepio, a patrician from one of the oldest families of Rome, was not happy that Novo Homos, new man with no aristocratic blood, will be the one in charge. In 105 BC, Mallius arrived to Gallia Narbonensis and positioned his troops on the west bank of Rodon River, near the city of Arausio, while Caepio stayed on the eastern side despite orders to cross the river and unite forces. He did that only after a letter from the Senate, but even after they forced the river, he insisted on a different camp and didn't take orders from Mallius. The king of Cimbri, Boiorix, decided to negotiate with Mallius and ask him to let tribes pass into Spain. Caepio didn't want to see Mallius succeeding and getting all the credits for stopping the Germanic threat, and he attacked Cimbri. His smaller force was easily stopped by the latter and killed after being surrounded. Mallius wasn't prepared for the swift attack of the enemy. His legionaries were basically encircled by the Germans with their back to the river. 80,000 legionaries died on that day, the biggest Roman defeat since Hannibal crushed them in Cannae in 216 BC. History is ironic, and tribal alliance didn't attack Rome itself after this battle, as Hannibal after Cannae. Most of the tribes moved into Spain and pillaged northern part of this country, so Romans got one more chance to catch their breath and prepare for the inevitable invasion. In 106 BC, Marius finally finished the Jugurthine War, and after the defeat at Arausio, he was elected consul for the second time in 104 BC, despite the law prohibiting being electing a consul for the second time. His victory in the North Africa proved that he is the most talented Roman commander, and citizens were eager to elect someone who can stop the Germanic invasion, and that someone wasn't a patrician who had no military skill. Marius recognized the problems of Roman army. His reform is one of the focal points of the Roman military and political history and deserves a series of documentaries by itself. But for the sake of this one, we'll give a short summary. Citizens who didn't own land were allowed to join the army, which bolstered the numbers and gave poor classes a social elevator. Army became professional, training and equipment were standardized, and those serving more than 16 years would be able to retire and were promised lands. The number of non-combatant serving legionaries was decreased, and legionaries started carrying all of the needed supplies, weapons, and rations themselves, which made the Roman army more mobile and improved the stamina and endurance of the soldiers. Traditional XXX ACS organization of the legion was scrapped for a more agile formation based on cohorts group of 400 soldiers. Romans were never before forced to fight with such a numerical disadvantage, and at the latest change allowed their front lines to be more resistant against a barbaric onslaught. Marius also promised to grant Italian allies in Etruria and Picenum full Roman citizenship if they served in the army. All these measures allowed Marius to organize the strongest Roman army in history with best trained legionaries. By the time Cimbri and their allies saw strong resistance in Spain by the Celtiberian tribes and decided to turn their attention to Italy in 102 BC, he was ready to stop them. Germans divided their army into two halves, and while Teutons led by the king Teutobod moved via the Mediterranean coast in order to attack western part of Italy, Cimbri moved from Gallia into Norisum to move into northeastern Italy. Marius was waiting for Teutons in his well-fortified camp close to the Rhone River. Germans tried to assault this camp, but their 3-day-long attack failed and they lost thousands. That strengthened morale of the legionaries, while Teutons decided to bypass Marius to the north, but the latter moved parallel to them. Two armies met in the summer of 102 BC, 26 kilometers to the northeast of modern-day Marseille, in the location called Aquae Sextiae. Marius had 40,000 soldiers and his opponents outnumbered him 2-1. Romans positioned themselves on the hill, with 4,000 legionaries in the ambush in the nearby forests. To provoke Teutons, Marius led his cavalry in the attack, but retreated on the contact behind the line of legionaries. Germans ran swiftly uphill and were met by the Roman pilums and then shield war. Romans had a clear advantage in training and equipment, and soon Teutons had to start a retreat to the base of the hill, but were followed by the legionaries. By this point of the battle, Teutobod forces were tired and battered. They tried to create a shield wall of their own, but combined attack of main Roman forces from the front and ambushing group from the rear broke their lines. More than 50,000 Teutons were killed, while Roman lost few thousand soldiers and continued massacre in the Germanic camp, where tens of thousands were killed and enslaved. But that wasn't the end of this war. Cimbri were still strong, and Marius' co-consul Quintus Litatus Catulus was tasked to defense of passages of Norisum. However, under pressure from Germans, he abandoned Brenner Pass in the Alps, near the modern-day Innsbruck. His second attempt to mount a defense on Adige River also failed, when Cimbri tried to encircle his positions and he had no other choice to retreat beyond Po River that was more defensible. That allowed Cimbri to loot rich territory between Alps and Po River. By that point, they were traveling for almost a year from Spain to Italy through a very harsh terrain and were exhausted, so they were not so eager to attack Catulus' positions in the winter. Marius used that opportunity to move back into Italy. He was elected the consul yet again. In the spring of 101 BC, he moved into Po Valley, where his 32,000 legionaries were joined by 20,000 of Catulus. Cimbri continuously avoided Marius' forces throughout spring and early summer. It's hard to imagine Cimbri not wanting to fight a general battle if they really were outnumbered Romans 4-1. Marius were pushing Cimbri forces to the northwest in an attempt to entrap them along the Alps. Some historians claim that Boiorix learned about Battle of Aquae Sextiae in July of 101 BC and sent Romans a letter demanding a battle in order to avenge Teutons. However, it's quite possible that Cimbri were not able to avoid Romans anymore. By the end of July, both armies reached Vercellae, near the modern-day Novara in the northern part of Italy. Romans led by Marius and Catulus had more than 50,000 legionaries, while Cimbri were able to field between 55 and 60,000 warriors. Marius' army had an advantage in cavalry as most Cimbri fought on foot. The battle happened on the 30th of July. As soon as the battle started, Roman cavalry on extreme flanks of their legions moved swiftly to attack their counterparts. Cimbri line moved to attack Roman infantry. Marius' cavalry was able to win their engagement against Boioric's horsemen in short order, while infantry lines clashed with Romans on the defensive. The Roman cavalry then turned and attacked the rear of the Cimbri line. Germanic forces were surrounded and almost all of their army was killed. The battle only took few hours. That was the end of the Cimbrian War. Romans were able to defeat this threat, the biggest one since Hannibal. But events of this war widened the cracks formed in the Roman society in the last century. Parties were infighting, the prestige of aristocracy was at all-time low, while generals were gaining more influence and armies were loyal to them rather to the people of Rome. In a way, victory in the Cimbrian War and very positive Marian reforms caused the continuous civil wars of the next centuries, which first brought the end of the Republic and then gradually weakened Roman Empire and allowed it to be eventually destroyed by the Germanic tribes. This was the third edition of Kings and Generals. We appreciate your watching our video. Hopefully you will leave a comment, like and subscribe. Please consider sharing this video. We would like to be able to appeal to a wider audience. This was Nurex and Phoenix channel, and we will catch you on the next one.